Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. I am joined by Creighton, my partner. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well. How you doing, man?
I see that you're sporting not just his production swag, but you got a Calvary
Oh yeah,
316 shirt.
I am all decked out in merch today.
And all decked out in merch. Explain to the audience what we're doing here.
All right, so basically the way this works is we're gonna record an episode of Outlaw Radio, and by we I mean Zach is, because I'm not in the actual episode. I am here though with you in the behind the scenes look, where we're gonna do all 4 blocks as one video, and you get to see us talk in between, and just kind of how it all works.
That's a pretty good summary of things.
Well, I appreciate it. We've been doing this a couple of times.
We have been doing this a couple times. I hope you've been enjoying it. We've enjoyed doing it and kind of getting into a groove. We're posting these videos primarily at calvary316.tv for our church folk. They're also tweeted out, Facebooked on not just Calvary 316's Facebook page, but also Outlaw Radio. We've been posting those on the Outlaw Radio Facebook and Twitter accounts. So if you like this stuff, let us know and share it. So that's the easiest way we can kind of spread the word to what we're doing. With all that being said, let's just dive right into the radio show.
Absolutely. Let's get started.
And have some fun. You ready?
Sure.
At this point, the music starts rolling, probably already rolling. And first block is 14 minutes. So here we roll. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams, and I pastor a church located just outside of Athens, Georgia. The name of the church is Calvary 316. Not only are there some wonderful 316 verses in the Bible, but we happen to be off of Highway 316. If you're a local or not, it really doesn't matter at this point because no church is gathering in person. No church should be. Let me rephrase that. So wherever you're listening, I encourage you to check out the live stream of our service. The easiest way to get to it is by just going to facebook.com/Calvary316. Again, that's facebook.com/Calvary316. Or you can learn more about the church and see kind of the archive of all of our sermon content by just visiting the website, which is Calvary316.com. Wherever you're listening, or however you're listening, whether you're listening on the radio via one of our amazing radio partners, whether you're listening to the produced version of the radio show that we podcast out weekly, or if you happen to be watching the live recording of our recording of the radio show. And to explain that, he doesn't know I'm about to do this, Creighton Vaughn has been helping me. Some of you kind of been wondering, where in the world is Creighton? Because he was on the show for a while, but he hasn't been on the show recently. Creighton, can you explain to the radio audience and those listening on the podcast what exactly we're doing, and that you've actually been here for several weeks, you just haven't been on the radio show?
That's right, and that he's 100% serious. He caught me by surprise. So basically what we're doing is, as Zach records the podcast for the podcast and the radio show, we're also videotaping it. And so the way it works is it's in 4 blocks, and we take time between each block to have a conversation between me and him about the things that he said, whatever, what we think of the disease, given that we're talking about coronavirus for the last 3 weeks. And so we're videotaping that as one succinct thing that you can then watch as kind of like a behind-the-scenes look at how things work here at Outlaw Radio.
One of the main reasons that we're doing it this way centers on the reality this is not a live show. It's not, we're not on the radio live. Therefore, you can't call in. We can't interact with the audience in that type of a way. This show is recorded about a week and a half, sometimes even 2 weeks prior to its release date. Doing it this way, video recording, the taping, it allows us to put this out very quickly on our Facebook page, on our website. It's very easy to find the video. And so if you like listening to the radio show, check out our Outlaw Radio Facebook page, which is facebook.com/The Radio Outlaw. And you can actually watch us record what you're listening to right now, which is very cool. Regardless, again, of where you're listening or how you're listening/watching, I do hope you stay with Creighton and I for the next hour as we seek to deconstruct the negative perception that the world has of Christians by boldly discussing relevant topics in what we believe to be an honest, a genuine way. The world needs more honest conversation, and that's what we're trying to do. We are talking about, and have been for several weeks, this coronavirus pandemic. I don't know how you could really justify being a show that deals with relevant topics and not making this kind of the center of your show for a period of time. No doubt, there's not a whole lot else going on in the world of note. Where our attentions are captivated by the coronavirus pandemic. Most of us, I think it's something like 80% of the country is in some type of shelter-in-place mandate and some type of quarantine. Social distancing has become part of the lexicon, become part of our vocabulary. And so we're going to take today and discuss the coronavirus, this epidemic, etc. Last week, we took a bit of a break. We talked a little bit more, kind of put on the pastor's hat, the pastoral hat, and we took an opportunity to try to provide some exhortation, some encouragement in affliction. If you missed that episode, again, go to the podcast. You can listen to it. We looked at a cool story in Acts chapter 16 of Paul and Silas and being arrested, being thrown into not just jail, but in the dungeon, placed into the stocks there in Philippi, an earthquake setting them free, but they chose to remain in their suffering. And God did some really cool things through that decision. And so last week we took an opportunity to provide some encouragement in your suffering. And we're all suffering to some extent, some more than others. Let's be real. There are people that are listening to this show that have been infected with coronavirus or are coming out of that infection. Man, our heart goes out to you. Our prayers are with you. Whether you yourself have been infected with the disease, whether you know someone, this is a crisis of monumental proportions. But even if you haven't been infected with the disease has still had a profound impact on your life. You can't go to work. Your kids aren't going to school. Everything's been interrupted. I was supposed to be watching the Masters golf tournament this weekend, and that's not going to happen. Although I am excited because beginning tomorrow, they're going to air 5 days of Master Sundays, and I will be watching them. I'll be captivated by them as if I didn't know what was already going to happen. But everyone has experienced some type of an affliction, a suffering, a disruption because of this coronavirus pandemic. I want to start today by explaining a little bit of where we are. First, and I don't say this to be coy, but there's a lot of people dying. There are a lot of people infected with this disease, and especially those who already have pre-existing conditions, especially those who are elderly. The body bags are piling up. There's not a nice way to say it. I mean, the death toll is climbing, and it's climbing rapidly. The interesting question, though, that most people are now centering the debate around is we know people are dying, but the question ends up being how many really and why. And what I mean by that is how many people are really dying from the coronavirus, or what they were dying from became exacerbated by the coronavirus. And there's not a lot of data on that. Again, this we know for a fact this disease, this virus, it has an adverse effect primarily on people who are already dealing with major health complications. Is it just speeding up the rate of fatality? Or how many of these people were going to die anyway? Like, there's a lot of data that we don't know. Yes, there are a lot of people dying. The coronavirus is a precipitating factor. But the question really is becoming like how many? We don't know. And why? Why are people dying from this? I'll give you a great example, great question. And Creighton, this will specifically apply to you. People, this is radio, a podcast. They don't know. You're an African-American gentleman. If you're on the video, you can see that, correct?
They might have a little bit of trouble guessing that. But yes, I am an African-American individual.
You are an African-American individual. Did you know, and I heard this today, that in Chicago in particular, African-Americans are being infected with coronavirus 3 times the national average. That's like breaking stats about this, and
Wow.
no one has an answer for that.
Is it just density? Because I know Chicago it's like an urban inner city thing. Like, is it just a population density thing?
That very well could be. Again, African Americans tend to center their populations in urban big city environments, and we know New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, South Florida, even downtown Atlanta, where we are.
Yeah.
70% African American. So yeah, that could be. But I heard Dr. Fauci today talk about all kinds of other health mitigating factors. Again, they just don't know. There's so much about this virus.
It's just an unknown quantity.
That's an unknown quantity that really, there are a lot of people dying, but we really don't know why. Beyond that, the models have been off. That's something else that we're learning. All of the models that we were basing our entire health strategy around, as well as economic policy around, these academic computer models, academics way smarter than I am, plugging in data, trying to extrapolate out worst case scenarios. It was apparently one such model that came out of England that theorized in America we could see 2.5 to 5 million deaths. I mentioned a 6 million number early on.
Right. That's the model that the curve is, the whole curve thing is coming off of, right?
Is completely based
flattening the
on
curve.
The flattening of the curve, the social distancing, the shelter in place. There have been, and people need to understand this. We've based our entire strategy on computer models. Like, we haven't actually based our entire strategy off of actual data, because China didn't release any actual data, and they kept everyone in the dark as to what was actually going on. China could have answered a lot of this, because you wouldn't have had to rely on theoretical, because you could have actually looked at the actual, because they were months before us. But everything we've been making decisions based upon have been purely theoretical, which I guess is cool, but also is kind of alarming. And one of the reasons that I find it alarming is the number of deaths are not correlating with the models. Like, there are a lot of people dying, and one death is a terrible thing. But the high rate of deaths, the high rate of fatalities, we're not seeing the astronomical numbers. They keep revising it. I mean, we've gone from 2 million to 1 million, to 300,000 to 500,000 to 250,000 to 100,000. I mean, they're just spitballing, because no one really knows. And that really leads you to three different options. Again, we're talking kind of where we're at. One, the first option to this is that this was going to be really bad. The models were correct. And our approach to shelter in place, self-quarantine, social distancing has been successful. That the reasons the model isn't playing itself out consistently is that what we're doing actually to mitigate the model is working. So that's an option, and that would be a wonderful thing. But the second option is that maybe the model was totally wrong and our approach didn't matter at all, and instead our approach ruined the economy. Which
would be bad.
Which would be bad in the sense that these computer models were totally wrong, and yet we based our entire approach on them, meaning that what we've done really hasn't done anything, hasn't mitigated anything, and we've done more harm than good. Now, the only way that we'll really be able to know that is when they start doing, like, randomized testing. So they start just
antibody tests,
so that they find out how many people were really infected, what was really the rate of fatality. We'll get an answer to that question, but it'll take some time. Thirdly, the third option is that this could have been bad. Our approach was totally wrong, and it didn't matter because viruses kind of do what they want to do, and that you could say, yeah, this was going to be the type of thing that 5-6 million people could have died from in America. But you know what? It got warm unseasonably fast, and viruses don't like the warmth. And maybe our sheltering in place didn't matter. Maybe the social distancing didn't matter. Maybe it was purely the weather, that there was a natural remedy to the spread of the virus, much like you find with the flu. Again, we're not going to really know that until we do much more broad spectrum type testing. Creighton, anything you want to add? We got about 30 seconds left.
Just that This is a crazy time, man.
It is a crazy
I
time.
don't have anything. Jeez.
It is a crazy time. It's been bizarre to stay at home. It's been bizarre not having your kids in school. It's been bizarre not being able to play youth athletics. Our seasons have been canceled. It's been weird. Right now, my kids are inside my house because we're sports fanatics, flipping back and forth between a Hawks basketball game from earlier this year to a Braves game, Braves versus the Marlins, April 7th of last year. So, I mean, that's kind of where we are. We're reaching a break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on the Outlaw Radio Show. I threw you a curveball there, didn't I?
You really did throw me a curveball there, bud.
Well, I thought you did such a good job explaining it, to the audience that, you were here, and I like to keep you on your toes.
Well, that has been proven over the last 27 years for certain.
I've got a lot more to get to, so let's just kind of keep tracking, and we'll have time to unpack this a little bit more, you and I talking off air.
Sounds good.
You want to do the contact information real quick?
Sure, why not?
Here, let me hand this to you. You got it? All right, we'll come back, and then you do the contact information, and 12 minutes. You can hand that back to me when you're done.
All right, I can do that.
All right, you ready? 3, 2, 1.
So one of the most important aspects of Outlaw Radio is our desire to continue to connect.
Let's
My
just
goodness.
start that totally over again.
Yeah, welcome to behind the scenes, guys.
Welcome
this is
to
kind of how
behind
this
the
goes.
scenes.
Every now and then, my tongue doesn't want to do what I tell it to do.
It's you've never been known for having the gift of gab, Creighton.
No, I have not.
Which, although you can be very articulate when you want to be,
Yes.
you just get nervous because people are watching you on video.
It's more like I can be articulate when God wants me to be. I have very little control over
you have
it.
very little control. That's why you're single, apparently.
Yeah, probably is.
All right, so start with welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show.
That's a good point.
And then go from there. You ready? 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. We just want to remind you that one of the most important aspects of Outlaw Radio is our desire to connect with you, the audience. If you have any questions about something said on the show, want to challenge an opinion you didn't like, or would like to submit topics you'd like Zach to address in future episodes, and literally nothing is off limits, there's several ways you can reach us. The first is email, which is info@outlawradio.org. The second is Facebook, which is The Radio Outlaw. And the last is Twitter, which is @radio_outlaw.
Thank you so much, Creighton. We're talking about the coronavirus, and we're starting things off by discussing where we're at presently with things. It's been a couple months since the coronavirus cases started popping up around America. Very interesting. One of the preconceived ideas that we've had was that the first case occurred with a traveler from Wuhan, China, came to the state of Washington January 15th, that he was the first case. I read something yesterday that said that the coronavirus, or at least a strain of the coronavirus, could have been in circulation in America as early as November. Like, they're not 100% sure. And there are a lot of people that I've even talked to that were like, this fall, November, December, man, we had this weird sickness went through our work, and it was like the flu. I mean, everybody got it. It was like the worst flu you've ever had, but no one tested positive for flu. I'm not saying it's coronavirus, but if you don't test positive for the flu, it sounds a lot like you might have been sick. Creighton, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
How many people do you actually know? So we're 2 months into this. We're a good month into lockdown. How many people do you personally know who have the coronavirus or been infected by the coronavirus?
No one confirmed?
Yeah, same here. I know absolutely no one that has been infected with coronavirus. Not a single person. 0. And yet none of us can go to work. I don't know anyone. And matter of fact, Axios did a poll that was released today that only 14% of Americans know someone infected with coronavirus. Only 14% of Americans.
That's squared with the fact that there may be people infected who aren't aware they're infected, right?
Obviously that would factor in, because if you didn't know you were infected, you couldn't tell someone you had been infected. Thus, you wouldn't have known if they had been infected. If you don't know you were infected yourself, then... And most of us very likely could have been infected with coronavirus and just not know it. We will find that out. But just in regards to where we are right now, A lot of people are dying, but there's a lot of questions that are rising to the surface. The second thing I want to say, and I think I can say this with a measure of confidence, is that my confidence in the experts is really beginning to wane. Not just the elected leaders, which I should be clear. The elected leaders, they're not scientists. They're talking heads, and a lot of them are morons. I'll give you a great example of this. Our governor in the state of Georgia, Brian Kemp, who's a Republican, so I voted for him. It was better than the alternative, is an absolute moron. Last week, he came out and gave a speech about this shelter-in-place order that was going to go into effect Friday, that school was canceled for the rest of the school year. And he said, he was asked the question, well, what changed your calculation here? And he said, well, the CDC just came out with a report that I read last night that said that you can contract the coronavirus from someone that's asymptomatic.
Wait, he didn't know that?
That was my reaction. As a matter of fact, my mom even sent me a text that was like, has he not even been paying attention to the news? Like,
has he not been to high school biology?
We have known this literally for weeks. And yet Brian Kemp comes out there and it's like, I changed my entire position here because of new data that's not new at all. And man, that's just one of like many examples. Let me give you another one. And what's more alarming is I'm beginning to lose confidence. I never have confidence in elected officials. They're always going to fail you. But it's my confidence in the quote unquote medical experts. You know, the people that have the PhDs that's supposed to know. Like, they're the people we're supposed to be really confident, taking our clues. Yes, I can debate about politicians, but when it comes to these people, politics aside, Fauci, Birx, Surgeon General, these people know what they're, the CDC, right? Well, think about it. Early on, you had the CDC's guidelines, you had the Surgeon General coming out telling Americans a bold-faced lie. And the lie was, masks don't do anything for you. They literally came out in CDC's guidelines. The Surgeon General had a big press conference, and they made the argument to the people, you don't need to go buy masks because masks, well, they only protect someone that's already infected from spreading it to other people. They don't actually protect healthy people from contracting it. You know, which makes a lot of sense, because have you seen a picture of anyone in Asia? Everyone's wearing a mask.
Or anybody in a hospital.
And that was the thing. In the same breath that they told the American people, you don't need a mask, they turned around and said, but we need you to give all of the masks to your local hospitals because, you know, the healthy nurses and doctors, they need them. And I was sitting there, even when they were saying it, like, that doesn't make any sense at all. But you know what? They're the experts. We got to trust them. Well, what's happened in the last week?
Everyone's wearing a mask.
They have, and not just everyone's wearing a mask. The CDC had to reissue new guidelines saying, yeah, masks are important. And it's like, are you kidding me? You know what really took place? And I'm not a conspiracy tinfoil nut, but they realized that they were not prepared. The government did. The hospitals realized they were not prepared. They realized they didn't have enough masks. So, in order to get the first responders masks, they had to keep the population from going and purchasing masks. So they lied to the public so that none of us would buy masks, so that all the masks could get concentrated to the hospitals. And then once the hospitals had enough masks, then they break the news to us like, oh yeah, you pawns, you needed a mask. And so we have like Etsy, the entire website is people frantically trying to make masks. My mom is making masks and mailing them to people.
I have one of your mom's masks.
You have one of my mom's masks. So the mask, like, does that not cause you to lose a little confidence in the medical professionals? You remember when this all started? The biggest thing, I mean, Oh my goodness, every press conference. Cover your mouth and wash your hands. Cover your mouth. That's how we're going to stop this thing. We're going to stop this thing in its tracks. As long as everybody coughs into your, where your elbow is, and you wash your hands. I mean, just all the time. Hand sanitizer. You just wash those hands and you just cover your mouth. We'll all get through this. Yeah, that does nothing when it's airborne.
Yep.
Does nothing when it's airborne. Well, that's why we need you to stand 6 feet from people, because it goes airborne only when it's like an aerosol. So you have to actually cough it, and then the water particles that you breathe in, that's how you get the virus. So you need to be 6 feet from. Okay, I guess that makes sense. No big deal, no problem. And then guess what? We find that you could actually just transmit it by talking to someone, which means it's not even 6 feet. You should stay totally away from them. But then what's the point of washing your hands when it can live on surfaces? Like, everything that we've been told is not true. Hydrochloroquine. The president has come out saying we need to take this anti-malaria drug. There's great research coming out of France and the media, and these Democratic governors are like, oh, that's hogwash. Trump, owns an equity stake in some company, and, he's not a doctor, and he doesn't know this, and he doesn't know that. And then guess what? Everyone has reversed their opinion on this anti-malaria drug. How about this? So you tell me, Creighton, if this makes any sense to you at all.
Okay.
And I'm not going to say this was an original idea. I heard this last night on Tucker Carlson on Fox News. And when he said this, I thought to myself, we are all morons and have been lied to. And this is the argument that he made. He said, so to flatten the curve, we have put in place this kind of mandated shelter-in-place mandate, right?
Right.
So the idea of the shelter-in-place mandate is everyone stay home so that you stay away from everyone.
Right.
Because the virus needs human-to-human interactions of some kind in order to transmit. So we're telling everyone, stay home, don't go anywhere, shelter in place, except, once or twice a week, the entire community can go to the grocery store to get groceries. So wait a second. We're telling everyone, shelter in place, except for one day a week, everybody get together.
Well, yeah, no. Quarantines are like a stopgap at best.
But that's not even a quarantine. When you're telling people it's shelter in place for, a good amount, but except for when you need groceries, everybody come together and touch things.
Yeah.
Have you been to the supermarket? I mean, there's no...
No, I've not been to the supermarket.
It's insanity. It's insanity. If this really worked, then it would be a shelter in place, and we have the military bringing groceries down the street.
Well, yeah, if it was real bad, that would be the way to go.
That would be the way to go. So again, my confidence is kind of waning, and then it dawned on me. These academic models that we're basing, the shelter-in-place mandates that we've decided to shut down the government, shut down the economy over. These academics that make these computer models. They're the same academics that ran computer models that said the world was supposed to end from global warming in 12 years, 10 years ago.
Was it 12 years, 10 years ago?
Yes, it's moronic.
I don't think that math works out anymore.
These are the same people that told us from their computer models that the seas were going to rise and that, Athens, Georgia would be a port. It's moronic. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on the Outlaw Radio Show. Man, I'm just getting a lot of things off my chest.
No,
here.
I definitely noticed that. No, I feel like you have the disdain for the political, social media model that I've had my entire life. I see a lot of myself in you right now.
Do you really? Do you really?
You're just a lot more vocal about things than I am.
My goodness gracious. When I watched that press conference with Brian Kemp, and if you watched it, I mean, you tell me, when he said, hey, did you know that if you were asymptomatic, you could spread it? Oh my goodness, I just found this out. We need to shut it all down. And it's like, bro, I knew you. Brian Kemp's a few fries short of a Happy Meal.
Apparently.
Still get my vote when he runs again. But
My goodness.
I hope there are smart people around that guy, because he's not the sharpest tool in the shed.
You do know fools do tend. Oh no, they don't. No, they don't hang around smart people most of the time, do they?
They don't. Let's jump back in. Man, this is I'm just taking way longer than I thought it would be. I've got so much material. But let's just keep rolling. Third block, 11 minutes. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. We're talking about coronavirus. Joined by my sidekick, Creighton.
Hey y'all, I'm still here.
How you doing?
Doing good.
Are you surviving coronavirus?
More or less.
More or less?
Yeah.
You're at work. Don't name the company. But how are things with your job?
It's interesting. They're actually, one of the things that I learned from all this is that I'm working for a great company. They gave everyone, all the full-time workers, a bunch of emergency time off. That way, if we do get sick or if they have to shut down, we can still get paid for a couple of weeks. We're all wearing gloves. Most of us are wearing masks and just doing the do, because we can't shut down until we have to shut down.
And if you have to shut down, if your business has to shut down, then we're all in trouble. I want to pick back up where we left off, and we're talking kind of like where we're at right now with this pandemic. And I talked about initially that lots of people are dying, and that's heart-wrenching. I mean, really, some of the images that are coming out of freezer trucks filled with bodies, and it's gut-wrenching. Any life. But it's lending some questions, because the models, we aren't seeing as many people die as we thought we would. Maybe that's a result of our policy. Maybe the models were right, but our policies have been successful. Maybe the model was wrong, and our policies have just caused a bigger problem, and that was ruining the economy. Maybe the models were right. It was going to be bad. Our approach was stupid and didn't work, but nature kind of took care of things because it got warmer, and like viruses do, it moved through, mutated, and just didn't become as big of a thing as we were worried about. Regardless, my confidence is waning. I don't have much confidence in our elected officials, but we've all kind of been sold on trusting the experts, the scientists, the PhDs. Well, the problem is that a lot of the things that they've been coming out and telling us to do, just give it a week or two, and they're changing their positions. Not that it makes any sense, but I don't know, man. You just get the feeling that no one knows what to do. Academic models had predicted global warming hysteria, that the world was going to end in 12 years, and these are the people that made us shut down the economy. Which leads to kind of the third thing of where we're at, man. The way things have been playing themselves out in the political sphere, and I blame the media a lot for this, is that, a lot of people with September 11th, you were too young, Creighton, to remember September 11th. How old were you?
I was in third grade, so
you remember it,
9?
but not. You
I
will
don't know how old
remember
you are in
it, but
third
not.
I remember it happening, but I don't remember the world before it, and I remember the world like maybe 7 years after it is the earliest that I have like a real memory of it.
So I was 18 years old in Bible college. Like, this was a big, significant moment in my life, and I remember for a good period of time, politics did not go back to normal. Everybody kind of unified around the flag, around our elected leaders. Partisanship took a back seat because we got hit, and everybody rallied together. Now, it's true that I think a contributing factor to that was that Bush was in his first year in office, so he had 3 more years to go. It was an election season. And once you got closer to an election, then they started blaming Bush for all kinds of things. But at least initially, there wasn't as much partisanship. With this coronavirus thing, man, we've had no hiccup in the partisanship. The political climate in Washington is toxic. So toxic that I'm afraid it's going to make it very difficult for us to pivot towards a solution. I'll give you an example of this. Everyone has held fast to this shelter-in-place order. Republicans and Democrats alike. Social distancing, shelter-in-place. That's the remedy. That's the only way this works. But if more and more data comes out saying, yeah, that doesn't work, and it's ruined. The cure is worse than the actual underlying problem. Everyone has become so committed that I don't think anyone will humble themselves enough to pivot. I think we'll just keep doubling down on stupid.
That doesn't sound like the government to me.
And that's what worries me, because it totally sounds like the government. And we're going to double down on stupidity. We need to get the economy moving again. If 80 some odd % of people get infected with coronavirus, have the antibodies, don't ever demonstrate any type of symptoms, then why are they sheltering in place? You can have 85% of people out working, saving the economy, and keeping those that are at a higher risk in some type of quarantine. But nobody's going to pivot to something like that because everybody's doubled down on stupid and they've wedded themselves to the models, and we're in for trouble. I am so thankful that they're sending out money to people. I think it's a good thing. I think the payroll protection program is a great thing to save small businesses. But you know, the thing no one's talking about is, where did you get $2 trillion? $2 trillion is a lot of money. Where did you get it? You printed it. You printed $2 trillion. That's more money than we've ever printed at once in history. The GDP of America is $4 trillion. We just printed half of that, and no one paused to think, if we print $2 trillion, what will that do to the worth of the dollars we already have? You know, if you have more of them, what happens to the ones that you presently have? It's called inflation. Yet no one's talking about that. No one seems concerned with that. We have problems. Fourth, and I want to move on. And again, this is not a tinfoil hat edition of the Outlaw Radio episode, but I think you would be a moron if you didn't at least recognize that there is a growing danger to our republic and our freedom. A great example of this. So, Creighton, what's the difference between a republic and a democracy?
A republic, you have representatives who vote for you. A democracy, you vote directly on everything.
Correct. We have a federalist society.
Right.
A conglomeration of states in union. It's called the United States of America. And one of the things that I've appreciated about Donald Trump's position on this pandemic is he's been very hesitant to do what everyone accused him of doing. Everybody accused him, you remember in January when they impeached him, of being a king and a tyrant?
Oh, yeah.
Well, he's done the least king tyrant thing you can do, and that's not issue edicts that all 50 states have to adhere to. For example, people have been pushing him, pressuring him, to issue a national stay-in-place edict.
Right, but he doesn't want to do that because that would be like the opposite of small government, which is generally what Republicans are into.
Exactly, limited government. There's a constitutional problem to that. You need to leave it up to each state. Not only that, but there's just a logical argument to it. You know how many cases of coronavirus are in Wyoming?
I can
Like
probably
zero.
not very many because there aren't very many people
Like
that live
zero.
there.
Why do you need a shelter-in-place edict for Wyoming when they're already sheltering in place? They live in
There's like 6 people in Wyoming.
with no black people, and they live miles and miles and miles apart from each other. And so I think that there has been a brilliance in letting each state make their own decisions based upon the needs of each particular state. But you're getting a lot of pressure for the federal government to intervene, for the federal government to take control. That's a problem. Not only that, but you're getting local not the governor, but the mayor of Los Angeles came out a few days ago and he says, we're going to have a problem. This is not going to end until we actually have a vaccine. And so you need to go ahead and just prepare yourself that we're going to be quarantined and sheltering in place
For another year?
off and on for years until we finally have a vaccine. And it's like, you do realize we might not ever have a vaccine. Like making an antiviral, like a vaccine for a virus, is a very difficult thing.
Which is why I still get the cold and the flu.
Right. Even though there's, you can get vaccinated.
Right.
It's insanity. You have people say, well, we need to do the South Korean model. Well, the South Korean model, if you dig into it, is that they had everyone install an application on their phone that dictated followed them, GPS, and dictated social distancing. An alarm would go off if you get too close to somebody else's phone.
Yeah, and they had that information on where everyone went publicly available.
Publicly available. Not going to happen in America.
I'm not downloading it.
Not going to happen. And you get like Bill Gates literally talking about these type of social programs. People talk about, you never let a good crisis go to waste. And if we're not careful, we're going to see a lot of our freedoms, our fundamental freedoms, start to be to erode. Just a minute left before our break. On a more positive note, where we are, there's some exciting things happening. We could be, and I say could be, at the beginning of historically a great awakening. Greg Laurie, Harvest, their online service last week had over 1 million views, and the president tweeted about it. Thousands of people gave their life to Jesus. Again, we could see in a moment of crisis, Bibles have been sold more than at any other point in history over the last week. More Bibles have been sold. They're flying off the shelf. It's an amazing time. It's an interesting season. We'll pick up that thought. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on the Outlaw Radio Show. Man, I got to figure out where we're going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is crazy that Trump shouted out Harvest Church for it was Palm Sunday that he watched.
It was
right?
Palm Sunday,
Just
yeah.
This past Sunday. That's
Well, I was watching
craziness.
I was watching the press conference, and he was talking about things, and he made the comment about churches, even doing their part, and that people are, having to attend church online, and then he just kind of volunteered. Yeah, I'll be watching the live stream of this church in Riverside, California, and I was like, there's a big one there.
Right.
And was texting with Josh, our producer, and then later on, like an hour later, Trump tweeted out specifically Greg Laurie and Harvest, and I'll be tuning in, and
that's awesome.
yeah, very very cool stuff. And then Greg Laurie even tweeted out that he was as shocked as everybody else that he had no idea this was like a political favor. I know some of you were thinking that, you pessimists, but
Don't worry, I was there too, guys.
yeah, we're all there. Let's just continue the episode, finish it out, and then yeah, we'll talk about it.
Cool.
You cool? Last
Good
block.
to go.
3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. We're talking about kind of where we're at with this coronavirus, this pandemic. A lot of bad things we've talked about in this episode. This has not been, I will admit, the most uplifting of episodes. But I concluded the previous block with a silver lining. And we won't really know this for a little while. But it could be that we are at the beginnings of a great awakening. I'm not necessarily referring to a revival as opposed to an awakening. And let me kind of explain the distinction. A revival happens when Christians are revived to God's word, to evangelism, to prayer. Yes, salvations, conversions happen as a result of it, but a revival is something that the Holy Spirit does within Christians, that we're revived, that within a crisis, the church gains a new clarity of purpose, of mission, of determination, of priority. Revivals are a good thing, and you can look back in history and see various revivals. Great awakenings are more historic than that. Great awakenings are when you have societal changes that happen as a result. One of the things that took place in one of the last great awakenings was William Wilberforce in the abolishment of slavery. You had societally bars shutting down, people en masse giving their life to Jesus. You had a moving of God's Spirit amongst the people, drawing people to church. Like, it wasn't like the church could say, oh, well, we were revived and we started doing what we needed to do and this resulted. It was like, oh no, God moved, and we were all kind of along for the ride. A great example of a mini awakening would be the Jesus movement of the hippies in the late 60s. Pastor Chuck didn't bring about a great awakening. Pastor Chuck happened to be in the middle of a great awakening. In his own life, there was a revival where he left denominationalism and just started a little Bible study, teaching God's word, simply teaching God's word simply, verse by verse, chapter by chapter. And this awakening started happening in California amongst the hippies. There was a societal shift of change. The hippies were becoming disillusioned with their lifestyle. There was a longing for meaning and purpose. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis. This was coming out of the Vietnam War. You had big things happening globally that set the stage for a movement of God's Spirit, not based on anyone other than the Spirit. And then as a result, you had thousands of hippies coming to Calvary Chapel getting saved. I don't necessarily classify that as a revival as much as I do an awakening. I saw a mini awakening. It was short-lived after September 11th. I saw a bit of a revival. I saw that within churches that were half full for the next month, were packed to the brim. But they were packed to the brim mainly by Christians who realized, what am I doing with my life? I need to get back to doing the things I'm supposed to be doing. It was like, I'm a believer. I'm just kind of wayward. I'm not taking this seriously. And it was like a shock to the system. People woke up. That's a revival. You also saw, though, at the same time, societally, people start asking questions. Now, that didn't last very long. In fact, I could probably go back and say it lasted about 6 months at max. I know that because for weeks I was in Bible college, we were going down to Oceanside to do some street evangelism, just witnessing, talking with people. And Oceanside is a weird combination of people, Creighton. You have on one end Camp Pendleton right above it, so you have a lot of Marines.
Right.
So this is a seaside, it's on the Pacific, there's a pier, harbor, kind of an area. You have a lot of Marines. Also a huge Muslim population.
I see this going well.
Yeah, so September 11th, and you had a lot of Marines and Muslims and patriots, and it was a kind of a toxic powder keg of a place.
Understandably so.
And we were doing street evangelism there, and you saw we were doing it beforehand, and it was just dead. No one wanted to talk to you. Nobody was interested. But man, after September 11th, people were having questions. People wanted to know what was going on. People had a longing. There was a genuine movement. I think this pandemic, I mean, it has the type of effect where, and let's be real, society will look different when this is done than it did beforehand.
Yes, there's no going back to what life was like in December in the USA.
In fact, I intended to get to some of this in today's episode, but we'll push it off to next week. There's a lot of things that are going to change. A lot of things that are going to change in society. Hygiene, customary greetings, social distancing is not, how long will it take for people to congregate again in stadiums?
How long will it take to shake a stranger's hand again?
Right. Or to give someone a hug. I saw a live stream video of a church service that happened a year ago. And the guy was, got up to do the announcements. And as part of the announcements, he said, why don't everybody turn and greet somebody you don't know? And so, you see people in the video walking around, greeting people, giving hugs. And you're sitting there. In our context right now, I was appalled. I was like, oh my gosh, I have anxieties about this. Like, there are going to be things that never return, things that change forever. Society, like, this is on par with a world war.
Yeah.
Things change. Global alliances change. The global order is reshuffled. The economic balance gets flipped. We don't even know what this exactly looks like next fall, a year from now. We don't know what comes back. If you were a business and you had to pivot, where instead of everyone working in your office complex, you said, hey, you have to work from home, and we're going to teleconference, and we're going to work remotely. And in the process of doing that, as a business owner, you're like, yeah, the productivity of my employees went up, not down, because they weren't driving in an hour and a half to and from work, and they weren't, they could focus better. Like, if you have businesses reach the calculation of like, wait, we were more productive people working at home, why in the world do we have this multi-story office complex that almost sunk us because we couldn't pay the rent on it? Like, those are the type of things, if nobody goes back to work, if people just keep working from home, man, that changes gasoline prices, automobiles, commercial real estate. It has a seismic impact. We'll talk about this more in the next episode. But spiritually, you have to imagine something like this. When you have Bibles selling more than they've ever sold before, when you have churches kind of across the spectrum citing increased attendance via their digital platform than physical attending, when you have people that are passing on the word, answering questions, ministering, man, we could be 2-3 years from now looking back and saying, this was the awakening we had been praying for as a church for years. And if that's the case, then maybe the coronavirus was a blessing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
In a weird way.
It kind of reminds me, and we're running out of time, but like, Jesus said to the 120 believers, go to Jerusalem, wait for the power of the Holy Spirit, then go out into the world, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth with the gospel. And so the Holy Spirit was poured out in Jerusalem, cool thing, church started. 10 years, they're still in Jerusalem. They hadn't gone anywhere. And so there was a great persecution that arose in Jerusalem. Why?
To spread them out.
To spread them out. Okay, if you're not going to move out, then I'm going to allow this to happen.
And move you out.
To move you out. Creighton, thanks for being with us.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Always a pleasure.
Well, you've been listening to the Outlaw Radio Show. If you like what you heard, I encourage you to contact your local Christian radio station. Thank them that you're carrying this type of programming in your community. Also want to encourage you to visit our website, outlawradio.org. You can access our podcasts, which is available on Apple Podcasting as well as Google Play. Check out our Twitter at @radio_outlaw. info@outlawradio.org is the email address. Facebook.com/The Radio Outlaw. Like us there as well. Once again, I'm Zach Adams, and I hope you join me this time next week for more of the Outlaw Radio Show. There we go.
Well, in the books.
I did not get to like half the material.
Well, that might be because you wrote the material as a monologue, and then as you started your monologue, you decided to turn it into somewhat of a conversation.
That's true. Although there was still way more
more
monologue than dialogue.
That's how all of our conversations goes out.
Hey. Hey, I'm one of the dozen people that like you. Remember that.
That's a good point.
Remember that.
So before we do kill the video, I did want to, you might have said this when you were going over the revival versus awakening thing. Would you describe it as a revival as something that happens with Christians and an awakening is something that happens with non-Christians?
Absolutely. I think that's a great, easy way to think about it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And I think that there are lots of people in America, they'd be wrong, but there are lots of people in America who would disagree with you that, an awakening is possible in America.
Here's the thing, though. If an awakening requires the church, you're right. If it requires us, you're right. It's impossible. Like you can't do an awakening. You can't make an awakening happen. An awakening is when God chooses to do something supernatural within a society. And if you operate under the premise, as I do, that if you kind of track the last 80 years of cultural shifts and movements, you had this move away from absolute truths, science, Darwinism, the theory of evolution, questioning absolutes, removing God from the equation. Relativism is what was kind of burst out of that. What's true for you is true for you, but that doesn't make it true for me.
My truth.
It's all about one's perspective. The problem with that is if everything is true, then nothing is true. And if nothing is true, relativism is not the end. It's not the end of the road. It's just the bridge that gets you from absolute truth to like this weird nihilistic narcissism, where you either have people that if everything is true, nothing is true, then they're like, well, then what's the point?
Nihilism.
Like what's the point? Like, if nothing is true, then there's no meaning. There's no purpose. Why am I even here? Which is incredibly depressing, but is the True Detective Season 1 Russ Cole way of looking at life.
Absolutely. And I can definitely see at least parts of our society that are headed that direction quickly.
Oh, huge parts of our society. I mean, you see nihilism creeping in all different kinds of ways. Or the other result is, and this is greater, like there's a greater illustration of this, but you're either like, if everything's true, nothing is true, what's the point? That's either really depressing, or your conclusion is that it's all about me, which is it's nihilism and narcissism.
Right.
The easiest way to see that in art, you can like track art over the last 500 years to see how art reflects culture, right? Art reflecting culture. Well, what is the greatest art form of today's society?
Selfies.
It's the selfie. We even have a stick to help you do it. It's all about you. It's the selfie. That's the great art. There's been more pictures you've taken more pictures of yourself than any other generation on the planet combined.
Yes, I think that's absolutely believable.
Period. People are consumed with self, which is you've seen this, and I think the coronavirus pandemic has brought to light those two things. You have people that are like, screw this, what's the point? And then other people are like, why do I need to care about the old people? Why do I need to care about any person? I'm just going to care about me. And so I'm going to buy every bit of toilet paper Walmart has. Because
right.
I'm not
running out of toilet paper.
I don't care about anybody but me. Or you got these morons that were down there spring break and that were like, I can't get coronavirus. I don't care about Grant. Like, again, but you know what happens historically? When you get to a point where you're nihilistic narcissist, is you're right at the precipice for an awakening. Because when you're in a culture that is struggling with meaning and purpose, it's like Solomon. Solomon searched for meaning and purpose in Ecclesiastes every way he could under the sun.
Right.
And he says it was vanity, grasping for the wind. It was all pointless, worthless. And that drove him to what? Well, I need to see if there's something outside of the sun. Something beyond me, beyond this material world, beyond the physical, which is why he concludes, like, what's the point of man? Fear God and obey his commandments. Like, it's that simplistic, which is an awakening. And
right.
And so our society, you say, well, some might say our society, that there won't be an awakening, that there can't be. I would make the argument that I think it's prime for it, but it's only a movement of God. You can pray for an awakening, but you can't make an awakening happen. Now, I will say this. I do think every revival doesn't necessarily lead to a great awakening. But every great awakening
leads to a revival.
Always includes a revival. It always includes a revival.
That makes sense.
And you always find, interestingly enough, with every great awakening that you can study historically, it always connects, yes, with societal things that are happening, big issues. Mm-hmm. But it also has a church teaching God's word. Like there's a movement of God's Spirit through his word, the teaching of God's word. Again, interesting things. I can't wait for the next episode, man. I've got all kinds of thoughts about what will change in church.
Cool.
What will never come back. Digital giving's here to stay. Smaller worship service sizes. I read an article today that really talked about the multi-site breakup. For the last 10 years, we've been having, big churches realizing why have a big building? Let's spread out into multi-site.
And then just broadcast their sermon into a church.
This guy wrote, he says, overnight, every multi-site church became a single-site church on the internet.
Yep.
Digital church scales in a way a physical church can't. And then kind of the idea is, are you as a church trying to be Blockbuster in the age of Netflix? Where the church is going to have to deal with some big things. Some things are going to change, like the Sunday morning greeter. Like, you really want somebody meeting you at the door, putting their hand in your face?
I certainly don't want to be that guy.
No, I don't. I'm not sure I think people will be way chiller with like, let me come into church. The 80-20 rule. I'm going to get way ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, this thing's going on for a hot minute now, hasn't it?
For a hot minute. Well, thank you for joining us, Creighton. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure, man.
We are social
Great time.
distancing, by the way.
We're a good bit apart.
Good bit apart. So
Yes.
if I get coronavirus, it was Creighton's fault.
That's absolutely true. I am not quarantined. I have to work.
We're getting out of here. God bless.
Bye,
Love you
y'all.
guys. Stay healthy.